Wait, recording. Shirley here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and this is part 4 of this energy reading. And this is about somebody trying to, what they think is apply a certain advice. And I know I talked about the fact that the 12th house is also the bedroom, and wherever there are places where women are trafficked, all one really needs to do, and I was talking even about Netherlands, is to treat these women well, to treat these women better. And that went misinterpreted. That went misinterpreted in the sense that people thought that they can still do the dealing or the trading, they just have to provide better conditions. That's not what I meant. And that would not, and I want to emphasize that because that would not prevent invasion. That would not protect from invasion. So this correlates a lot with something that Lars Royman wrote, and I was talking about granite exactly, not knowing that and then seeing that post, and something that Light said. So this is kind of a channeling that arrives with that context. It's kind of like each of us is receiving information in our own way. And so, from my perspective as mundane astrologer, what I see is that somebody's not going to prevent invasion by just accommodating for better conditions for the brothel. They're still going to be held accountable for holding a brothel. So, and that can be a man or a woman of color, not. And here's the thing. There is a difference between people stuck in certain situation trying to improve upon the conditions of the situation and people that steal the wealth of the people to enslave them, trying to give them a little more crumbles. Okay? It's like, oh, I picked the particular things you like and put that in the scraps of food. And it's kind of like, well, you're still gonna be held accountable for keeping that person locked in that situation. And there was an energy that was even showing that to that person, that that's what they do. Because there's an energy that knows what it can and cannot provide at this moment in time. And it could be the same energy that said, hey, I know you would never let me treat you bad. I know that. You will never let me treat you bad. And, and that energy identified. Now, from my perspective, it's like people trying to compete over who holds the best brothel, but none of, like, all of them are war criminals. And not only that, all of them are doing crimes against humanity. And they keep trying to think that the other people are stupid, but the other people are not stupid. At least not in this scenario. Or that the people will just fight for crumbs, and people are like, no, we are the wealth. It's our energy, it's our creation, it's our life energy, it's our sovereignty. Today I opened this morning with a testimony from Trudy saying that all of her female friends and people or women around her, including her mother, were killed since 2015. Mind you, 2015 was not even 2018 when she was exiled from the PVDA, from the Dutch parliament. Okay, talking about the femicide in Netherlands. That's not something anybody can hide. You think and you think about the village. And the village has human trafficking, has ritual sacrifice, ritual abuse, and the village is so consumed by that that eventually that village falls under another regime. Now here is the energy was trying to think that, oh, we'll just provide a tiny slight better conditions. No, but the people are aware that it's their creative energy. Lai talked about that a lot when she said people are no longer good with that type of treatment. They see gaslighting, they see she mentioned even those that try to spiritually gaslight people into being in toxic relations. A lot of the twin flame scams were around that. People will not be Stockholm syndromed anymore and not call it Stockholm syndrome. I don't know what is Havana syndrome that has to do with targeted individuals. What is, because that I think is to do with human trafficking. So people basically people no longer settle for those syndromes. They no longer settle Antares, ascendant Antares. People no longer settle for basically having a syndrome rather than a relationship or a job. Oh, this is okay. Havana is a series of medical complications with no known reasons, mainly experienced by American federal and army service outside their countries. And that can be tinnitus, cognitive difficulties. It's the targeting individuals, basically. Dizziness, insomnia, headaches. So people thought that what I said or that what somebody said, and it could be many people. Okay, Light talks about the fact that people no longer settle for the gaslighting. They no longer settle for people that are going to gaslight them into trafficky relationships. Whether it's marriage, whether they're being seen as a lady or not, even when they supposedly have to present themselves as a lady or even a first lady, they are being treated as degradation, mockery, humiliation, among the circles of the people. Now, it's true that the men also, or that the hermaphrodites also treat one another in that same fashion, but this is exactly what people don't settle for anymore. They don't settle for that. and they expose to the nitty gritty of the things underneath, digging, and discovering children's bodies, ritual abuse remnants. It's not just about a superficial culture. You know, these cultures where people say, oh, you are, I don't know, a dumb fuck, you are a this, you are a that. You know, kind of like somebody tried to talk with me like that. Or like, oh, you old fuck. I am also an old fuck. No, it's not about that phrasing or that language or that colloquial supposed language. It's those children buried underneath the tunnels of the city that inbred these linguistic tip of icebergs that we see and don't feel right for us. There was another guy that talks about happy relationships, and he talked about a guy that insisted on a girl to call him daddy, and he said, well, she should just shut up and call him daddy. Like, it's such a small detail. Mercury Sagittarius is exactly those small details that are the tip of the iceberg of something bigger. If it was such a small detail, she would probably happy to call him daddy. But it comes from, in that specific context, this slight incompatibility is not slight because it comes from grooming language. If it wasn't done in grooming context, maybe she would call him daddy herself. And this pertains to people being sensitive to that, and they don't always know. It just doesn't, with Uranus Taurus, people became more embodied. All the hacks and the rituals and the this and the that was done to get in the way only created bigger explosion. You can't treat people like they're trashy and be surprised that they shed everything into the actual trash as they move, okay, as they rejuvenate and they move, and you're left in with the trash, trying to still project onto them that they are trashy. Where to begin with, you were discarded from their life for that very reason. You treated them as trash and they discarded you. You tried to treat it as, I'm going to prove this person is trash, and they discarded you. That not to be mixed with intuition. And a lot of people, I got it a lot, where a lot of people were like, people wonder, where do you have this information? Who do you work with? Nothing. Is embodiment and intuition, and then the information comes about. And those that try, and here is the thing, they are the people that actually did the shadow work, the radical acceptance, the tending into where they were partaking in patterns that were not healthy and so on. They begin to evolve, they evolve. And then what happens is that it's those people that stay stuck there that think that this person tends to sabotage every relationship they had, not knowing that that person sheds like leaves all the Stockholm syndromes that people try to interact them with. And here in the conglomerate of the energy, it was even that guy that said, hey, you would not let me treat you badly. I know that. You would not continue to communicate with me if I try to treat badly. So you're up to something. You're up to something. Yeah, of course. You're about to make decisions for the world that would traffic billions of children and funnel the wealth outside of what would prevent them from being orphans, not from families that mistreated them, but from actual life. That's not a personal relation. And people try to preserve a loop that is like a Mobius loop when the loop has been disentangled. The loop has been disentangled. They know what that means for them. And they know that the more that they try to confine, the more explosions there would be within the very place they try to confine them to, that show, hey, this is a war criminal, this is a trafficker, this is a this, when they wanted to present, oh, they keep entrapping themselves in relationships that no, 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 no. That person was trying to entrap people in human trafficking ring. Here are the people that try to handle them too. Here is another person that tried to be the handler. And this is where this energy reading is. Somebody thought that somebody's being handled because certain people were set to be handlers. But there is no such thing as handler and handling, because people are not to be handled. Meeting someone's emotional need, nourishment need, even physical needs or not, is not a method to handle them. It's the basis. Now here is the thing. The handlers themselves have to grow out of the worldview of you don't deserve more than this, you don't that, or you only get to have all this if you do these war crimes. This is where the wealth is coming from. No, the wealth is actually original. And all of that is dumb fuckery pyramid scheme that was meant to make it look like it's not coming from where it's coming from. What do they do in Africa right now? They try to pollute the soil. That's the big debate they have with Gates, that and the castration. They try to pollute the soil to make it look like they're bringing charity food to the people that lost all they have with the wars and the this and the that over the gas that their country found there. and believed that it would trade. Look at all the solar farms growing on the parking lots. Nobody trades oil anymore. It's a bubble. And no country actually relies on oil anymore. We're not going to have another century of Gladio. Why are people afraid of Slavic and Soviet women? Because they can turn off the mask and build a freaking solar panel all by themselves. It's not that difficult. And have their own house and their own roof over their heads. They don't need to be provided for. And here is the challenge that they've had with feminism. Women can do all that. So how does one grant their place with it? Honor, respect, cherish consistently, and you'll never have to worry. Not about money, not about food, not about war, not even about cheating. But if you're worried about because you did things to women, to children, and things done to you, and holding a facade, whether it's a macho facade or a victim facade, while the victim facade is when somebody rapes and say that they are the victim. Okay, what happened in the Me Too? All the names that were mentioned, they saw themselves as the victim of these young girls that seduced them. Well, go against human trafficking and extortion cults and kidnapping of children to be tortured, and you won't be seduced by a 12 years old that was tortured and programmed to make you feel comfortable with raping her in front of camera. So somebody thought all they really need to do is to be a slightly kinder handler that steals that still entraps women. No, they actually have to be consistent, loving, and allowing person to say yes, no, and maybe without explaining themselves. And as long as the regime is operating from within those extortion cults, everything has to fall down for love to be, and it is collapsing. And those people that wanted to instead of dealing with what's inside, they try to find flaws in everyone and entrap people into relations with them. And then project it onto the women or the men. Okay, I don't know how it's like within gay relations. That won't work no more. If they kill all the women, they will not have that creative power. If they kill every woman that rebels, they will not have women, period. Because all of them will rebel. And they think that they would be so frightened that somebody would stay entrapped. No, because the threshold has been crossed. I haven't even looked at the video. There was a man that visited Afghanistan. And he came back crying, saying, Afghanistan broke me. with Uranus going all the way to a degree from Beta Persei, there will be a look at Afghanistan and the Taliban. But also at the Western leaders, hidden and visible, that created that. Whether by economic hitmanship, false flags. And they might look as innocent and as George W. Bush. George W. Bush looks like such a good and kind man. Everybody was really comfortable with the feminist prostitute that exerts her rage on men by being dominatrix, and then she is the feminist. It is feminist, and she is the voice of the woman that supposedly paved the path for others while being a torturous madam. Nobody buys that stereotype anymore. Nobody looks at that and sees that as salvation. Actually, women that went out of human trafficking, sometimes they remember the madams and they hate them more than the men. Why is there femicide in Netherlands? Because women will not be subdued and subjugated. They know it's their creative energy. They're not dumb. And killing them will not, basically it's their energy that people wanted to capitalize on, but they will be forced to basically enact the feminist agenda. And all of their actions will lead to that, because this is the energy, even if it's the energy of the dead, that energy was meant to do something in the world. In the Second World War, they put all suffragists in concentration camps. After Second World War, women got the right to vote. All the people that resisted that died. So people thought, oh, we can tax women. Okay, but you'll have to provide working rights, labor rights. You have to abolish rape, also within marriage. Oh, but the entire human endeavor is on raping children and making them enslaved to develop into dominatrix, drug dealers, and organized family people that talk about the traditional family Holocaust when every now and then. I mean, while we trade oil when Tesla Energy was in the 1800s, not even by Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla patented that. He also discovered that energy, but he patented that. Before him was another guy that didn't even patent that. Like, it's that free. Now the oil pollutes the oceans. It's in the water. Rape women, rape children, drink oil. Rape children, drink oil. You want to drink water? Well, what did you do to the water? The way you treated women is what you did to the water. And some of these women are intersex. With the cloning project, there are intersex people. The way that cloned people were treated within the cloning project. It's in the water. Those cloning projects were funded by some oil companies to consolidate natural resources using children and those who survive of supposedly particular bloodline to commit economic hitmanship and crimes against humanity. Well, it's in the water. Today, there are many groups that offer work while living, work in return for living on the property and so on and so forth. They forget to mention if they don't write the part of the property that the worker works for on their name, they will have the plague. As easy as that. Either that person inherits the part of the land that they live on, or they inherit the entire fucking land. Those are the options. But if they will rape children, some oil company will come and pollute the entire place and they have everybody dependent on food stamps. Where nobody even trades oil. Netherlands have solar farms on the roofs of the parking lots. Everybody needs a living space, but if the living space is occupied by Nazis, it will not get to live. Whether the atrocities are done by indigenous people or elite people or those that try to, be around the elite people, doesn't matter. Those ways of, oh, this woman is so poor, I'll give her a piece of bread and she will probably thank me forever. Yes, she will thank you forever. And then go about her day and be with another person and say, she's a cheat, she's a whore. No, you never saw her as a woman. You never honored her to begin with. Now, it's one thing to say, well, this is what I have to give because this is what I have to give. Is another thing to try to take a creative energy and give crumbles to the person and entrap them in trafficking relations and Stockholm syndromes and Havana syndromes or whatnot to the government federals that go abroad because they don't like that type of behavior to begin with. Then when there is the real plague, not the made-up plague, those whose immune system are the most sensitive, which is the traffickers, which is the landlords that never set foot on the soil. What landlords survived in the South in United States? Even the ladies that had slaves. It's the ladies that were working with the slaves and putting their hands into the soil. They survived, they lived. Yes, they had slaves, but they were digging their foot into the soil. And maybe some of them slaves inherited the land. So they survived. But the other people that had slaves didn't, because they began to mow their lawns, to trim the grass, to not grow anything. When it grows mold. Why the Italian houses in €1 are so moldy? Because the way everything was structured, it was bricks by brick by brick by brick by brick. Now, architectonically, it does look very beautiful, even the ruins. But it's creating mold within the houses themselves. These are houses that need constant rejuvenation. And then they had, you know what they did in Judaism? They did not allow people to light frankincense and myrrh. But when you light this incense, it dries the place and it purifies the place. It basically detoxifies the place. And normal houses were not allowed to have incense in the house that actually cleanses the space spiritually, but also physically. It's antiviral, it's antitoxic. Thus creating a public dependent on the doctor that indoctrinates rather than actual lifestyle that is. Why? Because a person cannot be a Kohen. A person can light incense in their own house to make this house antiviral. They can set a drop of essential oil in their house so that it will not catch the plague and the ailments and the disease. It's not foreign work, it's not pagan work. It's keeping their house purified and healthy. Only a Kohen can do that? Really? Why were the Egyptian empire lost? The information was given to the elite about balancing feminine and masculine energy. Now the 6ix9ine are known as the clones of the dead that murder people. That was not the origin teaching. 6ix9ine is a balance of feminine and masculine. And it's a practice of the sensual energy and purification that each and every individual goes through. Everybody goes through Uranus opposition, Uranus transit. Good morning. You're like the elite in Egypt. It's a Kundalini rise that liberates all the things that were to be transmuted. But these Egyptians said that they will have the knowledge and they will enslave people that will not have this knowledge. That's not the point. Even with the pyramid, that knowledge was supposed to go down to all of the ranks of the people that even built the pyramids. And what happened to the people that built the pyramids? They became sovereign. They went out of slavery. Why? Because of this teaching of sexual sovereignty. Nobody wants to talk about that. That the ocean parts like the Nile to make the path for the people who practice sexual sovereignty. Nobody wants to talk about that, but everybody is going to ask, who are they working with? What is happening? How do they know? They just have their yes, no, and maybe with themselves, and everything that tries to entrap, enslave, or imprison that has to fall apart like the plague. That sovereignty, it's not a story that anybody can control. It was not meant to be kept and controlled and not passed down so that people wouldn't know. In fact, two generations of men and women died because this information was not to be kept from speaking to the common people. The common people can go to AstroSeek, look at some videos, and learn astrology because they weren't meant to not know and have their own view of astrology because each and every person has their own Uranus. It was not meant for this and that indoctrinated religion to forbid studies of astrology and then pick astrological elections to do spiritual warfare to try to force you to pray to their egregore that is corrupt egregore, and each and every such religion falls, pagan or monotheistic. My God, what is happening today? Somebody tried to corrupt the Garden of Eden to hold the Garden of Eden as utopia. No, it's the basis. Oh, we cannot have heaven on earth is heaven. This is, I think, what Uranus comes to show us in Taurus. Otherwise, what the heck is happening, astrologically speaking? Oh, Lilith, Uranus and Lilith in opposition. The Grand Trine active in the sky. Okay, there's tremendous healing. See, when somebody tries to make something, to make of someone small, they're doing that because they're doing that to themselves, and then they try to make of someone big, they try to control how small or big is someone. This is Chiron Aries. They try to be in control over how another person sees themselves, whether consciously or not. It can be that somebody was even taking their advice as consultant, but that person that was listening to them and to see if that works, he kind of experimented with that and he saw that that doesn't work. But he also had the intuition that it's not going to work. And his energy that was being viewed, that somebody, light addressed it as somebody was thinking somebody has handlers and they just have to be like a slightly upgraded version of a handler to get a hold of someone. And they discovered that no, no, no. Not only was that person not being handled, but they're going to expose everything. And it's not that they're going to expose, just everything is going to be exposed to be their handler. And this has to do with sexual sovereignty and Kundalini energy, because when person is not denying that they're sexual sovereign, then they know that the sexual energy does reveal stuff cosmically. Um, you know, it's a connection. It's a connection to the all that is. That's why people go about and rave about orgasms. It really is that big. And it really is that real when it's real. And somebody knows that, yes, of course, sexual energy reveals the mysteries of the universe and whatnot. And they were only used to think about it. It's just like, the Jews were used that if a person lights frankincense, they must be a Cohen or they are a heretic. I don't know. Or they're doing blasphemy. I don't know what would be the Jewish equivalent of that. So they would think if somebody has a Kundalini rise, they must be a whore, a sacred whore, or the. No. Because they were on the approximation that they got to that was the sacred whore archetype. That's bogus. By the Egyptians that had their kingdom falling because they enslaved, and the slaves having the Nile part for them to walk free. At that time, the slaves were Jews, according to the Jews. According to the Bible, which is the Jews' book, those slaves were the Israelites. Maybe they were Palestinians. Now that say Jesus was Palestinian, every now and then the story changes. But the fact is that those that built those pyramids for these gods, they got the knowledge and they became sovereign. They were building the bricks of the statue and the structure of the intelligence of the sexual sovereignty, balancing the Kundalini energy. And the knowledge of good and evil through Ma'at. Now, all that people got was in Egypt was sacrificing cat for the cat goddess and children for the child goddess, which is the fertility goddess. Even the female goddesses themselves would commit suicide, just not for people to do that. There was a bridge to understanding, and to establish that bridge within the gnosis of society was challenging because it was an alien intelligence to the intelligence of the people, not necessarily because those were aliens, but because the teaching was alien to the condition of society at the time. This is also why until today, and I really thank Light, because until today the people that it's and as an astrologer, every person has Uranus somewhere, every person has a lot of divination, every person has an intuition about something. Okay, I had a relationship coach friend that she had a mathematician husband, not astrologer, mathematician, not mathematicoi. Okay, and she would listen to Abraham Hicks and so on, and she knew how to channel the disease of her cat, and how to find a parking lot in Tel Aviv, which is, you really need a medium for that. But her husband, she said, he doesn't speak in spiritual language, but he's so fucking intuitive. And she's like, how do you know this? Like, I just know. Of course, that's Uranus. It's claircognizance. But to us, we call it claircognizance. For him, he just knows. Doesn't make a mess out of it. It's not a big deal for him. So everybody has their own divinatory abilities. But to the people that walk around the masses, they are always surprised with who is the prophet. And they consider a person that just looks into astrology and knows stuff as a prophet. And they go by who has the prophecy. Now, sometimes this is true. Sometimes, I have a lot of divination, 29 Scorpio in the ninth house. with a lot of planets ruled by the Scorpio that's in the ninth house and in Scorpio Mars. And that means that, yes, I do have some ability to divine around mundane affairs that even I have to catch up to my own knowledge. And also, my mother had this, okay, it was, this is also why a lot of, our phones were tapped and so on, because she wrote a book about the bombing, and then that bombing happened. And she talked about Qatar funding Palestinian students, and people are like, how does she know? How does she know? They had a lot of divination there. That's it. C'est tout. Many writers have that, okay? Creation, Neptune. She has Neptune in the 10th house. So it's a career to do with Neptune, but it's not intelligence in that sense. She would write a book, and that book would be real, and a creation into being. And she was not being influenced. She would isolate herself to create. So it would be originality. And she tapped into that energy. Good morning. And every person would have divinatory abilities about something. But in the families, who gets the prophecy or who gets the divination or who gets the abilities is always going to be the most surprising. I can tell you that I ran into receiving divinations about the women that were mistreated at pregnancy and children born to that were more susceptible to be trafficked by the Rolodex from people who were coming as the figures that were in the Rolodex and even in jurisdiction roles. Or I was receiving energy that was very divinely healing from someone who was completely programmed to entrap people into cult like toxic relations, diplomatically and personally. Who gets the okay? Who gets properties? Who gets the abilities or the divine abilities or whatnot? Or the healing abilities is always going to be extremely surprising because that's a part of what we need to include and understand. Okay, think about it. If one could elect the gift of prophecy, who would they give it to? They would give it to the person that is the least included, because if that person is not listened, all the village is doomed. This is also the 12th house. And this is why somebody thought that somebody has handlers and what they need to do is to be a better handler. No! And they thought that that was the prophecy, that that was the advice. No! It means that there would be invasion for the fact that there is attempt to be handlers. Everybody can just provide people with the conditions to sovereignty. And what do I mean by that? It's not that everybody can lock them down and improve upon their situation. No. It's not about keeping them locked up. It's not about being handler. But people couldn't even conceive the so-called prophecy because they always had to see something as a type of a brothel, a type of a this. They couldn't see the bedroom as the bedroom. The bedroom had to be a red light district. They didn't even have a conception of, okay, bedroom life that is actually loving, sensual, trusting. Not even have that concept in their conscious or subconscious. And they wanted to project it so that others won't. But no. And everything was falling into the boxes of they must be that type of whore, they must be that type of whore. But they are a whore. Look, they reveal things, they know things. They're a sacred whore. No, they're not sacred. No, they're not a whore. You are only conceptualizing the ability to access Kundalini energy from within rape rituals that you called sacred rape and called people whore. There's nothing sacred about rape, and there's nothing whoreful about actual sensual connection and sexual sovereignty. It collapses the paradigms. And this is what is happening with the end of Uranus in Taurus. And I'm telling you, the Netherlands is going to go through an upheaval. It is already going through an upheaval, but this is because Beta per se is with Moon of Netherlands and is associated with, in Netherlands, the normality of the red light district and the attempts to normalize trafficking as sex work, and trying to discern between trafficking and sex work, which might collapse into itself altogether, completely and totally. The energy harvesting, banking, and so on behind those projects is being megalitically exposed. Another place is Israel, which is also, we have Sun Algol, or Sun Beta per se. Algol is an Islamic name for the head of Satan, which is even Sufi Islam, that was the wonderful of all Islam, almost the most wonderful of all Islamic traditions, called the head of Satan. I remember the hard work that Christopher Warnock did to expose people to the fact that Beta per se talisman, he calls them Algol still, but Beta per se talismans or Medusa talismans are not evil. And another place we're going to see is Libya. And now I saw that the son of Muammar Gaddafi is returning and people are afraid of him. F that. Muammar Gaddafi died because he allowed Viagra rape into Libya. Not Viagra pill, Viagra rape. The people that took Viagra and raped people. That killed him. He was taking care for every family. He lived with his spouse and family in a tent and said, until not every resident has a house, I do not go out of that tent. That sacred he was until the underpanties. It's not within that house. They would need to have a bedroom and they would need to have willing consent. It's only then that we can crush through the codes and the encoding and the programming and the corruption of the portals and the vortices around Beta per se that exist in Libya. Beta per se is the water. Is Medusa? The story of Medusa is about going away from that enslaved or rapey slavery and ruining everything that rapes becomes dead bodies upon dead bodies. And that prediction regarding Beta per se was when people enslaved and raped. Medusa Gorgon was in spirit, and she was more beautiful than Aphrodite because